Welcome. So I've noticed a growing stumbling block in the modern church, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So I wanted to bring it up. Have you ever had a difficult decision to make in your life, and you sought the Lord so He could help you understand which way you should go or things you should consider? Or potentially, have you been going through some harsh and tough times, and you've been racking your brain, you've been thinking about, where did I take a wrong turn? How could I get some relief? How do I get out of this situation? And again, you sought the Lord in prayer, and you asked Him, but you didn't get the type of clarity, or certainly in the form that you believed you were looking for. And to make matters worse, it can get kind of frustrating because you look around your family, your church, and you might notice different people or on social media who are having a greater level of specificity and a certain level of dynamicism with their relationship with God. He always seems to be telling them where to go and what to do and how to make the decisions in their life. And we live in modern times where there is more optionality and more choices than almost any generation in history. I've heard it said once that if you pulled a card, and that card would represent you could be any human in all of history, that you have a 60% chance to draw a slave or a servant or somebody who has zero control over the mobility of their life. And when we go to the Bible, it doesn't seem like the biblical authors gave this any consideration or they even saw this as a conundrum. It's not as if the letters of Paul are like, hey, you know what, you just need to struggle to try to find the voice of the Lord to help you make all of these choices and to deal with this modern burden. In fact, he quite does the opposite. He's constantly saying in his letters, I know what you're doing wrong, and this is what you should do. And it becomes hard to relate to those ancient problems. And this is because I would submit to you that the Bible is trying to get us to take an entirely different approach. We often become obsessed or hyper-focused in our modern times on God not only ordering the steps that we've chosen to take, but predetermining what those should be and then telling us ahead of time. And when we don't hear those, we become paralyzed and frustrated, and it kind of dominates our expectation of what our Christian experience should be. So I want to go to the life of Jesus, as I believe there are a couple of passages that can help give us wisdom on this topic. The later Jesus got in his ministry, the more specific and direct he became with a lot of his disciples. And this is what we see in Luke 18, when he says to his disciples, you know, all of the prophecies that we've been talking about, the things that say the Son of Man will be given over to the Gentiles and tortured and chastised and killed, but will rise again on the third day. Well, that's me, and that's about to happen. But here's the thing. Luke, in a footnote, says, and the disciples didn't understand this because the meaning was hidden from them. So here we have Jesus, who's trying to communicate to his disciples, but something's hiding the meaning from them. Now, conversely, if we look at Matthew 16, the opposite happens. Jesus says to his disciples, who do all these people say that I am? And they said, well, some people say you're a prophet reincarnated like Elijah or a great teacher. Then he says, who do you say that I am? And Peter raises his hand and says, you are the Messiah, the living Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus says, aha, Peter, blessed are you, because flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So how can we be more like Peter in Matthew 16 and less like the disciples in Luke 18? Well, Jesus would submit to you that is your understanding of who God is and what he's speaking to you and your ability to discern it, your ability to take the seed and have endurance with it is all related to the condition of your heart. This is the very reason that he gave for why he spoke in parables and is the subject of one of his most famous parables, the parable of the seed on the different types of ground, which represent the different types of hearts. And I'm not talking about avoiding any kind of malicious intent, like a sin that you particularly want to do. No, the heart is a much more complicated entity than we give it credit for. It's not just the seat of our emotions. The word heart is used nearly 800 times in the Bible, and the amount of actions that are ascribed to it is quite staggering. It thinks, it speaks, it intends, it wills, it believes. It is your consciousness. It is the truest form of who you are, and it's the priority of what God cares about. If we look back to Genesis 2:7, when God took the dust, our natural side, and breathed into it his breath of life, giving us a spiritual side that became dead upon the fall. When we are born again, it is the heart and the spirit, that spiritual side, that is eternal, and it's God's priority, which is why he wants to use the natural things that we're often so concerned about as a way to mature the spiritual, eternal things that will one day inherit the new creation. This is why Jesus often said things like, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? And if your right hand causes you to sin, then just chop it off. Again, it's not that he doesn't care about the natural order. It's just a question of priority. So how do we make this work? How do we actually take care of our heart so that we can hear the Lord and do things in the order that he has for us so that we can actually get the answers and the wisdom for our life? Well, I want to tell you a story about how it worked for me. There was a particular season I was going through when I needed to make a very difficult decision. And to make matters worse, a lot of the relationships and other natural things in my life were having difficulty as well. So it began to be this burden that dominated almost all of my conversations that would seem to come up. I'd wake up in the middle of the night arguing with myself about it. No matter how much I tried, it was all that I thought about. And so I was going into prayer constantly seeking the Lord, and I wasn't getting anything. Until one day, when I was in prayer, the Lord said, stop. Stop praying for the same thing over and over again. And I said, God, what are you talking about? I'm supposed to come to you in prayer. And he said, instead of trying to pull me into your circumstance, why don't you allow me to raise you up to see from my perspective? I said, well, how do I do that? And he said, well, if you learn more about me and my story and who I am, and you hang on every word of Jesus, then you know what? It's going to start to cut your heart. And I'm going to start to reveal all the entanglements that are there that are blinding you from hearing what I have to say. If you begin to focus on the work of the harvest that I have for you, and you start to taste and see what taking on my burdens is like, and the satisfaction you get from that, it'll change the desires of your heart. And moreover, if you point your spirit to me more often in worship, instead of the other cares and concerns that you have, or the other daydreams that might fill your heart, then that is all you're going to ever want to do. And that is certainly what happened. He began to sort through my heart, clear it out, help me out so that I could begin to hear and understand his voice. And then something funny happened. The very decision that I sought him for was made for me. I lost the ability to make it by happenstance. And I said to the Lord, was that what I was supposed to do anyways, the whole time? Or is that what you were trying to tell me? And he said, do you want me to change my mind? And I guess that was sort of the point anyways. I didn't care anymore. It was all the same because my heart was in a different place. Now, why am I telling you this? It's not just a tactic. It's a special time in history. And as Pastor Lauren has been speaking to us, this is a great day of visitation where the Lord is bringing his spirit to judge and actually liberate mankind from the ways of the world and the spirit of darkness and how it might have been tangled up into the things that he wants to bring to maturity. And if we are unable to, when we feel such loss or when we feel such change happening in our lives or in the world, focus on the condition of our heart so that we can hear his voice and rise above our circumstance instead of trying to pull him into it and get him to make things the way that they were or the way we'd like our natural world to be, then we're not going to be able to take our responsibility and partnership as the remnant to bring his word to pass. You guys, I hope this helps. Pray for me. I'm praying for you, and I'll see you next time.